Hello everybody and welcome to In the Clouds Instrument Ground School. This is your host, Chris Morrison. So today I'm going to kind of expand a little bit more on our instrument flight rules. Specifically, we're going to look at recalling the requirements to remain current as an instrument rated pilot, logging our instrument flight time, and also we're going to look at logging night flight time. So to maintain our currency as an instrument-rated pilot, we have to complete the following within the preceding 6 calendar months. And remember that word calendar months, because what that basically means is, let's say you get your instrument rating on January 1st. You don't have until June 1st to get this done. You have until June 30th. So you have an entire month to complete this, technically, outside of the original, quote, 6 months that you started with. Okay, so what do you have to do? We have to do 6 instrument approaches to minimum descent altitude, MDA, decision altitude, DA, or decision height, DH. We have to do holding procedures and tasks, intercepting and tracking courses using navigational electronic systems. A good acronym that many of us get to hear when we're in instrument training is 6-HIT. Holding, instrument approaches, intercepting, and tracking courses. So 6-HIT. Okay, so let's say we live in Minnesota. And we all know that Minnesota has probably really bad winter weather, right? I would say probably we start seeing snow showing up in October. And it keeps going, sometimes even till May. You might see a random snowstorm in May. I lived in Indiana. We saw random snowstorms in the middle of April. It could happen. So we don't get our instrument currency in that first 6 months. So from January to June, we don't get anything. So we've gone through an entire winter. We've gotten springtime. We've gotten hit with tornadoes. We've had thunderstorms like crazy. We didn't get the opportunity to do it. So the FAA is nice. They say, okay, you have 6 more calendar months to complete this instrument currency requirement. However, you have to have either an instructor or a safety pilot aboard when flying in instrument conditions. So what does that mean? That means from January to June, we were fine. We could have just gone up and said, we're going to go into every airport that we go to using an instrument approach, get a hold in there, and just use instrument flight rules every time. However, we didn't do that this time. So now we can't do that solo. We have to have an instructor or a safety pilot aboard when we're flying in instrument conditions in order to regain our instrument currency. Now, let's say we've had a weird summer on top of it. So from July 1st to December 31st, we don't get it done again. So now we've had an entire year go by. We did not get this done. Now we are going to be required to complete an instrument proficiency check. That has to be conducted either by a CFII, a designated pilot examiner, an FAA representative, a U.S. military instructor or check pilot, provided both the pilot and the instructor in the military, or a company check pilot under Parts 121, 125, or 135, and both the check pilot and the pilot being tested are employees of the same company. So let's say you work for a 135 operation, you don't get instrument current, which a little odd, but we're going to say you don't get that. And you go to get tested, but let's say you work for ABC Charter Company, but the only check pilot you can get is with FOX company. Can you do that check? The answer is no. And the reason is your check pilot comes from a different company than you do. Now, there's nothing in the regulations that I could find that says that if you are a U.S. Air Force pilot and the only check pilot you can get is a U.S. Marine pilot, that can't be done. However, I would still question that. I would imagine, even though I cannot find it anywhere explicitly in the regulations stating that they have to be of the same branch, that it's probably likely a good idea that if you are a U.S. Air Force pilot, probably should be getting your check ride from a U.S. Air Force pilot, instructor pilot. But again, I have not found this anywhere in the regulations, and if anybody knows of this regulation or can find it, please let me know. Please place it in the comments. I'd love to know the answer to that question. So exactly what is in an instrument proficiency check? Well, according to the FAA's Instrument Proficiency Check Guidance, there is an entire book on this, the IPC is going to have preparation, ground review, flight activities, a post-flight debriefing, and an instrument flying practice plan. So we're going to take a look at each one of these separately. So what is the preparation for an IPC? Well, under FAR 14 CFR 61.56, it requires that a flight review has 1 hour of ground training and 1 hour of flight training. However, note that's for a flight review. That is not for an instrument proficiency check. So they're two different things. Many times some of us might think that a flight review is an IPC if we do it as instrument pilots. And the answer is no, they do not. They are two totally different things. 14 CFR 61.57 Delta does not specify a minimum requirement for an IPC. However, in the IPC guidance, the FAA recommends 90 minutes of ground time and 2 hours of flight time. And part of the IPC should include or requires a regulatory review, a cross-country flight plan assignment that should include all the pre-flight elements as stipulated in 14 CFR 91.103. So that's going to include an instrument departure, an arrival, and approach. And based on the weather briefing for the day of the discussion and the flight. So you're not going to be doing it on some arbitrary day and getting a weather briefing for let's say you're doing your IPC on June 15th. You're not going to be using a weather briefing for December 25th. You're going to use it for June 15th. So what are some of the flight activities? So there's going to be a bunch of them, and all of these are included. So this graphic actually comes from the IPC and guidance document. So you're going to do your pre-flight preparation, weather information, cross-country flight planning, your pre-flight procedures, and understanding the aircraft systems related to IFR operations, the aircraft flight instruments and navigation equipment, instrument cockpit check, the air traffic control clearances and procedures. That includes the clearances, compliance with departure, en route, and arrival procedures and clearances, as well as holding procedures. You're going to have to be able to do flight by reference to instruments, so basic instrument flight maneuvers. Remember those time turns and those turns to heading, climb, constant rate climbs, constant rate descents, all of that. Okay, and of course there are many more, or several more maneuvers that we would cover. I'm not going to cover them here, but of course, pretty much assume that this is really very close to what the ACS is going to require you to do when you do your check ride. Assume that an IPC is basically a check ride. Okay, you're going to do your recovery from unusual flight attitudes. You're going to intercept and track navigational systems and DME arcs. DME arcs might or might not occur. It kind of depends on your instructor or your DPE that's doing your IPC or even your regular check ride. My understanding is they are not mandatory anymore, but they are an option for anybody to use. So they can still use it if they want to, and if it's available. Okay. You're going to have to do instrument approach procedures, so a non-precision approach, a precision approach, a missed approach, a circling approach, as well as unlanding from a straight-in or circling approach. You're going to do emergency operations, loss of communications, one engine inoperative, and this is only for multi-engine airplanes, obviously. During straight and level flights and turns, one engine inoperable, operative. Again, multi-engine airplane. We're not going to worry about it in a Cessna 172, but if we might be in a 410, expect that you're going to do one engine in-op procedures, as well as loss of your primary flight instrument indicator, so you will do partial panel, as well as doing your post-flight procedures. You're going to check your instruments and your equipment. What is part of your post-flight debriefing? So the way the IPC reads is you're going to replay the flight. You're going to listen to each other's perceptions of the flight. How did you feel it went? How did the instructor feel it went? You're going to listen to each other. You're going to explore your differences, kind of see where you can improve or where you may have done really well, that kind of thing. So the reality is, the way the IPC guidance reads is you're going to reconstruct the flight as identify the woulda, coulda, shoulda parts of the flight. What would you have done? What could you have done? And what should you have done differently, kind of situation. We're going to reflect on the learning experience. So they want to know, what did you learn from this? What's your personal assessment? What areas of improvement do you see, as well as what kind of areas of improvement does your instructor or your DPE or your instructor pilot or your check pilot maybe think you have. And then they're going to redirect your lessons, relate these lessons for future flights. So try to get you to think about what it's going to be like, or what you can use, what you could take away from these flights. So the IPC, the debriefing really should be kind of this idea of how you can improve, not necessarily, this is what you did wrong, don't do it again. More like, hey, you might need to improve here. So now let's look at logging our instrument time. Now we talked about this a little bit in the previous video. We're going to look at it again. So in actual instrument conditions, you have to be in the clouds, you cannot have visual references, and it has to be to the minimum descent altitude, the decision height, or the decision altitude. One of those three. If you're in simulated instrument conditions, you have to be under the hood, so you got to be wearing those goggles. You can occasionally see the ground, or alternatively, you can do it in a simulator. This table was adapted from the Federal Aviation Administration. So what is night time? Because now we're going to look at when we can log night hours. So it depends on your definition of night. So remember back to our private pilot, we had 3 different definitions of night. So the first definition is when do the lights have to be on? Then it's when can we log night time, night flight time? And then finally it's when can we carry passengers at night? So from sunrise to sunset, we got to have our position and anti-collision lights on. From the beginning of evening civil twilight to the end of morning civil twilight. So get out the trusty website, look up when evening civil twilight occurs and when morning civil twilight occurs. We'll kind of look at that a little bit in a few minutes, but we can log our night flight time. We can log our flight time as nighttime from the beginning of evening civil twilight to the end of morning civil twilight. 1 hour before sunrise to 1 hour after sunset is when we can carry passengers at night. This was adopted from 14 CFR 91.209. So I'm going to give a shout out to boldmethod.com and to 14 CFR 91.209. I like the way that they had drawn this, so I kind of recreated it a little bit fit for me, but I kind of like the way they did it. So the next 3 slides, yes, they were drawn by me, but I did adapt them from boldmethod.com, so help you out. Lighting requirements from night. So from sunrise to sunset, we get to be able to have our position and anti-collision lights on. Again, this is adapted from boldmethod.com. I did change it a little bit to kind of fit my way of thinking, and I'm very, very logical, very straightforward. I have to know right down to the degree type of thing. So it's been a little adapted to fit my learning style. But logging night flight time. So civil twilight actually occurs when the sun is about 6 degrees below the horizon. So when does this occur? About 30 minutes on average. It can change by day throughout the year, but approximately 30 minutes on average. That's why one of the best things we can do is pull up a website that shows us exactly where civil twilight is on that day, because the astronomers and those who are dealing with the actual time, usually around Greenwich, England, what they're doing is they're actually measuring this, so they kind of have an idea. So beginning of morning civil twilight will occur at about 6 degrees below the horizon, all the way to end of evening civil twilight, which is about also 6 degrees, so about 30 minutes after actual sunset. Morning, figure about half an hour before sunrise. So kind of think of it that way. It's before and after sunrise and sunset. But again, I'm the type of person, I had to know exactly the degrees, so I went and looked it up. Now for logging night flight time to carry passengers, we're not going to be talking now about what the degrees are. They actually state 1 hour after sunset or 1 hour before sunrise. Again, adapted from boldmethod.com. I kind of like the way they did it, so I kind of redrew it to fit for me. So when we're logging our approaches, they, one, have to be decision height or decision altitude or minimum descent altitude. And the following information has to be included in the logbook. Location of the approach. Where did you do it? What airport? Did you do it at Atlanta? Did you do it at a private airstrip that just happens to have an instrument approach? Did you do it at LAX? Did you do it at KUWL, Newcastle, Indiana? Did you do it at KMWO, Middletown, Ohio? Did you do it at KRDU, Raleigh, Durham? Did you go to Fort Lauderdale? MIA, where did you do it? What type of approach did you do? Did you do an ILS? Did you do an RNAV? Did you do a VOR DME? What did you do? Did you do a localizer? If you had a safety pilot, what is their name? Okay, so if you did it with Joe Schmo safety pilot, Joe Schmo's safety pilot's name needs to be in your logbook. Okay. If you did it in a simulator, you have to log what is the device, what did you use, how long were you in it, and what is the content that you covered. Did you hold over fix? Did you perform an instrument approach? All of that. So in conclusion, today we talked about maintaining currency, more in-depth coverage of the instrument of proficiency check, our logging of our time, both instrument and night, and how do we log our instrument approaches. I do want to thank Bold Method for their great pictures that I adapted from their October 28th, 2023 website, When Can You Log Night Flight and Night Landing. The link is right there. I highly recommend going and looking at it. There's some really great information with them, and again, I want to thank them. Hopefully they'll be happy. But thank you very much and have a lovely day. There are not going to be any questions on this test, on this module. But again, keep up with studying with Shepherd Air or Sporties or with ASA or with King Schools. If you're unaware, King Schools does have a free website where you can just take practice tests over and over and over again. So thank you again and have a lovely day. I will see you at the next video.